Good morning and welcome to the Level Set as we engage on this beautiful Saturday in March in the throes of March Madness. And we are going to take up a topic this morning with respect to athletics and its impact. And we're in an era where diversity and equity and inclusion programs are being eliminated all over the country. Shout out to the Cretans in the Tennessee legislature that voted to eliminate the Tennessee State University Board and the takeover. And at the same time, we're dealing with a dichotomy where the four-letter network engaged and entered into a contract with college football through 2031 for the low, low bargain price of $7.8 billion. We're entering this dichotomy where, on one hand, our children are being, from our community, are being pushed out from the administrators in high places, and they're being squeezed out from some areas that have traditionally allowed access to individuals from our community because believe it or not, individuals understand the brilliance that it takes to achieve in athletics at a high level. And I'll give you an example. Not long ago at one of the elite schools here in Missouri, we had a gentleman that had a perfect score on the ACT and a perfect GPA. He did not get into his top five schools, but there were individuals that had shown demonstrated brilliance in athletics over the years that had comparable marks. And the only thing that differed between them and the gentleman with the perfect marks was that they had perfect marks and they had athletic ability that lend them acceptance into that university. And the school took full advantage of their labor. So I want to open up the discussion this morning as we talk about all things sports related to our community. And we engage in this constant changing atmosphere and environment. Uh,
You posing a question?
well, I'm opening the floor up, gentlemen, and
Okay.
I'm opening the floor up at this time. I know you're not used to me, reaching an end to my sentences voluntarily. Uh, but I think it's important that we analyze this. And Charles, while you were out, we added the dichotomy that we're facing this morning. And first, let me add that we're joined this morning by Mike Jones, the Mike Jones, and Dr. Charles Alexander here on the Level Set. But we're dealing with this dichotomy of a changing environment where diversity and inclusion and equity programs are being eliminated and identified for what they really are, which have been safety valve programs. And they say the evolution is from there's a bell curve that you go in as the pet. The minute you raise an issue, you become a threat. Then you got to get. So we understand the veneer of the DE and I programs, but there's no pretenses. And at the same time, as I mentioned while you were out, Dr. Alexander, the four-letter network has just inked a contract going through the year 2031 just to broadcast the actual playoffs, the college football playoffs, $7.1 billion. And we juxtapose that with the hostile actions of the Tennessee legislature, who voted just this week to eliminate all of the board seats and the board members at Tennessee State University. And we sort of want to look at the impact that sports is having and the changing environment that we have. And so we can get some sort of blueprint or continue to get some sort of blueprint on how to evolve in this ever-changing environment?
Um, I said the low hanging fruit in that conversation. Really, I think kind of in light of how you positioned it relative to the four-letter network, is that we take the brother's book, $40 Million Slave,
That's correct. Bill Rhoden.
Bill Rhoden. Um, the the decision the decision made by black college presidents um, and boards and faculty, you know, in the probably starting in the latter 50s and then through through the 60s and early 70s to intentionally underfund athletics and thereby athletic programs and facilities in the interest of in the pure interest of academics, so as not to um, fulfill the stereotype of that we're dumb and we're only to be valued for our bodies and our physicality. To say the least, that was a bad decision, and it was also prime example of the harm of stereotype threat, where we just willfully made a decision to forego our greatest assets, which is us. We are our greatest asset, and so we decided to forego.
Please say that again.
It is us, So we were willing to forego our athleticism in the pursuit of our intellectualism that can't get funded without our athleticism. And so, we keep trying to say that this thing works other than that, but that statement you just made about the four-letter network, again, is evidence that it ain't true, that these two things have to coexist. And this is how colleges and universities exist. Those that are growing, those that are profitable across the board, have a mix between college sports and academia and state and federal funding. And, each of those pieces is necessary for the other piece. Like it's an interdependent type of relationship. But, we decided, but again, this is an example of stereotype threat. And so stereotype threat meaning, because I don't want to be perceived as the dumb athlete, and I don't want my kids to be perceived as a dumb athlete, then I'm just not going to have my kids play sports. And so I'm gonna take off a potentially character. I'm going to disband and ignore a potentially character building exercise, a potentially uh, you know, studies show that college athletes tend to be healthier on into life, like physically healthy. Um, College athletes, just like as the NCAA commercial says, they go professional in something. College athletes tend to graduate, tend to kind of, and we can talk about these numbers. Tend to graduate at higher levels and tend to again find employment in other things aside from sports, at least equal rates, and in some circumstances higher rates. But because we again are kind of bound by stereotypical thinking, we have literally dropped the ball, in terms of the maintenance of our greatest resource, and that is our own.
You know, C. Lamont Smith, a professional agent, once stated, this has been years ago, that entertainment talent, athletic talent, and I'm expanding it a little bit, athletic talent is to the Black community like oil is to OPEC, and that we have absolutely no right to abandon the commodity of that talent and to single-handedly give that to another community to manage and cultivate. Mike Jones, what are your thoughts?
Oh wow, this is a truly interesting path into kind of what for me is a larger topic. First of all, athletics have a profound impact on the viability of the school. What Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, has done for Colorado is extraordinary. Their applications are up from all over the country. The vibe he's created. Uh, they're they got people. Everybody wants to come to Colorado. Okay, now I mean, not athletes. I mean, people, kids in Colorado are staying. Kids from all over the country want to come. And I thought about Magic Johnson when he was a high school senior and he signed with Michigan State. I think applications to Michigan State went up like 40% his freshman year because Magic was coming to Michigan State. I think, and if you think about the numbers with the football arrangement, but just the numbers period, we're in the middle of the of March Madness, and it's probably the most magnificent sporting event. Period. For me, it's better than the Super Bowl, the World Series, the NBA Finals, especially the first weekend. But my point is, these are $1 billion activities, and I remember literally, I'm old enough to have watched and remembered UCLA's first national championship in 1964. You guys were your mothers were still holding your hands when they took you out. But what was interesting about that, the NC2A men's championship looked like first of all it was over in the middle of March, not April. It was over in March, and it was like a high school state championship. They played the semifinals on Friday, and they played the finals on Saturday afternoon, not Saturday night. Saturday afternoon, and maybe some basketball junkies watched it, and that was, it was cool, but it wasn't a thing. 50 years later, people who don't know nothing about basketball watch the tournament, fill out sheets, and what has happened to college athletics is it's been consumed by capitalism. Like capitalism is a virus, and it does that to anything that you can really make money off of. So that's one component. And Charles and you referenced the diversity, equity, inclusion thing, the DEI thing, I now think that was capitalism's way of modulating the influx of Black folks into the culture and stuff like that. And the pushback for me of what you're seeing is the conflict between racism and capitalism. I've always concluded that at the end of the day, capitalism was not in service to racism. Racism has always been in service to capitalism. And capitalism only has a need for racism if it makes money. If it don't make money, it don't make sense for capitalism, and it'll get rid of it. And what you're seeing in this pushback with DEI and all of this is really just the revolt and the resistance of mediocre white men, average white men losing their white privilege. Now, elite, billionaires and all that kind of stuff, they don't particularly have to care about this. Just like if you Larry Bird or Mickey Mantle or Caitlin Clark, you don't care about basketball and black players because you can play. But if you, the average white guy, then you got a problem after Jackie Robinson, okay? Because there ain't but 25 spots on the team, and mediocre white guys don't get to the major leagues now. Only elite players. Mediocre white guys don't get to the NBA. So if you expand that to what has happened throughout the country, and here's the issue. It's not enough white people in America to sustain the American economy. And Europe don't have any surplus white people anymore. Okay, so if you are going to grow a capitalist market-based economy, you have to have labor, you have to have customers, consumers, and that means you need people. Matter of fact, everybody in America would starve to death if they stop people at the border, because it's Latin American immigrants that pick all the food, that work in the chicken houses and the cattle house, but they also require this culture to readjust and accommodate this eclectic mix of people that are now coming in. It's happening in Europe too, but people say, well, Europe is being taken over. Europe would have collapsed already, but for immigrants, okay? The European economy in Western Europe, as we understand it, is not existent without immigration. American economy, but we kind of got Americans I've said it before, and I love saying it, the most actively ignorant people on the planet of the advanced world. So you got a lot of marginal, average white people, they got no understanding of any of this dynamic, and they just can't understand why they can't play no more. Okay, and they can't play no more because it wouldn't be no game if it's only people that was playing with them. And the money requires the game to keep going. And the money will the money will throw white people to the curb before God can get the news. And that's really what you're seeing now. And what you're really seeing is their resistance to the fact that the sun is setting on that day.
The capitalistic aspect of sports has its tentacles from the grassroots level all the way up. It wasn't long ago, a university president said to me that basketball was just about as middle class as golf is now. And the reason being is that if you're an elite basketball player, on the low end, your parents are going to have to spend $700 a year. I mean, starting in elementary school. But there are people that are spending as much as $40,000 a year training their kids, making sure they have the best trainers. And shout out, speaking of great trainers, shout out to Pee Wee Leonard for taking John Burroughs to the state championship. Vashon, Cardinal Ritter, and Chaminade as well. Congratulations. We had a great showing from St. Louis at in the state championship, but special shout out.
I had a son that played for Pee Wee
Right.
30 some years ago, and he's a special brother, man.
He trained my son as well. So I mean,
okay, then you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, right. So thinking of these trainers, thinking of some of these, the elite players have sports psychologists that they're working with. They have pharma companies that they're working with. They have strength and conditioning coaches. They have skills coaches. It's interesting And I don't know how this wove its way into the fabric of mainstream, but every third incredible move Brad Beal or Jason Tatum makes, they have to give credit to Drew Hanlon, a guy that graduated from Webster, played for Webster Groves, won a state at Webster state championship at Webster Groves, then went down to Belmont. He's a trainer, a basketball skills trainer. But I mean, and both Brad and Jason started. Well, I know Jason started working with him in high school. I believe Brad worked primarily with Mrs. Beal in high school. I'm talking about Bradley Beal, the Phoenix Suns, and Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. But I mean, how is this going to impact the game, Doctor? Alexander, as we go forward, we've seen these huge commitments that we have to provide towards.
It has created a whole nother strange dichotomy. And so as you're speaking, so you're talking about that $700 mark. Like all of this stuff is it's really literally, it's the best way to describe it is messy, right? And so I don't begrudge anybody their money. I don't begrudge anybody their opportunity, but I think we can all agree that we're no longer talking about hardship when we're talking about one and done. So the whole reason that piece came into play is because that brother couldn't, he couldn't afford to be in school, and his family couldn't afford for him to be there. What's the brother's name, Mike? The first brother that went hardship?
Haywood.
Spencer Haywood.
Haywood.
And so we go from Spencer Haywood to what? Bill Willoughby to Moses. Them guys had Jack Dooley squat, right? I'm not sure the last guy that we had make the bounce. I'm not really sure who that guy was. Might have been KG. They're like literally KG or Durant. That literally came from nothing, right? Most of these guys that we see, particularly, at this time of year, have somehow or another been in that $700 to $35,000 range of resources that have been put forth in order for them to ascend to the heights of athletic prowess, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. If you got the resources, you put the resources. I mean, that's your thing. You get to spend on your children how you spend on your children. But what we are seeing and what we've been seeing is that the way that capitalism works in every other field is that we start to see these huge disparities. And so if you're not a middle or upper middle class kid, sports are not accessible. You can't do it. And if you can do it for the sake of what the product is, if you ain't got some special people working in that program, it's gonna be a problem. Because it's gonna look like it's not funded. That's exactly the product that you're gonna see. And that's the product that your child is gonna get. And so we have to look at these things and measure the cost. We're not always doing a good job of measuring the cost. So we see the Brads and we see the Jasons, but we ain't measuring the cost. Why we ain't got why we don't have no public schools? Why all our public schools in the city closed? Because the folks who have the means are going elsewhere. And those folks who have less get less. And those are the other costs. And and we can see so for example, like last week we were talking about progress and the continuous fight and da 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 da. So yes, we can absolutely see that there has been uh, increase kind of across the board for Black folks. We making more money, but the wealth gap is getting larger. It ain't getting smaller. White folks making more money too. The same white folks that always have more money than us still got more money than us. That ain't changed. And so all of this looks the same across things, including sports, in which we really think we're making ground, but we really not. You know, it gives the appearance, but it has to get appearance so that those of us who know different, you know, are, can be kind of literally held at bay while they continue to exploit the masses.
You know, it's interesting you state that, because this is all about developing. And I had conversations this week with former professional athletes, and we talked about the portal. And I've had conversations with elite athletes who are seniors in high school, the parents of elite athletes. And the portal has changed the game to the extent where this is the gentleman I had a conversation with respect to the portal and college football, said that Division I coaches are not willing to take a chance on freshmen, and because they don't want to develop anyone. If I can go into a portal and get individuals that have already been developed, I'm going to extract them. So now you have top 5, top 10 players in cities that do not get a blue chip offer. And you see it in, it translates to the college basketball game, uh, the way that Calipari described it in his press conference. It's a new game, baby. I've got 18-year-olds that are playing versus guys that have, played 4 and 5 years in college, and it's different. Mike, what are your thoughts about that
I was
scenario?
just, I was just literally thinking about that because we probably all saw the Oakland, Kentucky game. And because that's going to be my point. Gorky or whatever his name, the shooter, right? I mean, lights
Right.
out. But he
Looked like a
24
Marine.
Yeah, he's a 24-year-old man. They're 18-year-old boys. He's a graduate student playing one more year. When he was playing other cats his age in Division II, he was averaging 12, 14 points a game. He come out here against them. It put like this. I'd have been all state too if I could have been 21 years old playing in high school. Okay.
When was the last time Calipari won?
Huh?
It's been
But
what was it, 2018 or 2012? I'll look it up.
yeah, but that's the last time you could aggregate these elite. Matter of fact, it was the Anthony Davis team.
It
The
was
golf,
and
the golf.
he had 2 or 3 lottery picks. Michael Kidd Gilchrist was on that squad. You
Right.
had Teague on that squad.
The
Uh,
twins from Texas, the
right.
guards.
Yes.
Uh, right. So what I'm saying is you can't aggregate that kind of talent anymore because even because Krzyzewski, for example, wouldn't do one and done, would not take somebody who was leaving. So Calipari got all of the cats. He was like a junior college coach. I mean, when nobody go stay, and he didn't care. Okay, because he's only building the team for 1 year. Now that has totally changed, and I actually think, and this is non-empirical based in my barbershop observation, that because of the way we develop athletes now through all of this process, we've eliminated the natural organic player. Okay, that you could go out and find. You say he's got the talent or she's got the talent. I can coach them up. Now the only kids you get to see are the ones that are in this process. And I would argue that the reason the women's game is better than the men's game in college is because the women are better basketball players. They're more naturally developed as athletes. They play instinctively better. They play better together. College, if you watch them, they like the board. Everybody's got a job, and they're all locked into the system, and they can all do their thing, but they can't play. And you're seeing all these elite women because they can just flat ass out play. They can play. Okay, you can throw them out there, and they can make it make sense. And you take elite men's teams, and you watching like automated pieces of a machine being put together. In the days it works, you got a hell of a team. But as soon as there's an aberrant incident that throws off the production schedule, none of them can adjust. And you can, and you know, if you watch James Madison last night against Wisconsin, literally Wisconsin didn't know what the Wisconsin has been ranked in the top 10 all year, did not know what to do with James Madison when they changed the script. And they were blown out the game. They never got back in the game. And that's not, and it's because nobody organically learns how to play.
And see right there,
and they
right
play
there,
for
Mike.
teams all the time. That's all they ever play with.
Yeah, you're looking at drills versus reps. That's
Right.
what you're looking at when you. This is the most skill, in my opinion. And I was in Chicago and played in Chicago, you know, in the midst of organic basketball. I think at almost one of its inflection points. But this is one of the most skilled groups of individuals you've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not gym rats. They are drill rats. And what you saw in that Wisconsin game were a bunch of guys that were used to running drills against cones. But as you said, you know, when traffic was redirected, the GPS went out on them.
But like when you're talking about Calipari, I mean, he's saying that this was some great reckoning now, but it ain't no great reckoning now. This is why he ain't won. This is what it's been looking like. Because the one and dones, they can't beat them guys who've been playing for 4 years. They can't beat them guys just know more basketball. And then what do? Them guys still get rewarded. They still go to the league. And so now we got an NBA full of other than good basketball. Like you can't watch every
Which is
game.
why I cannot watch the NBA game. I won't watch it till the playoffs. I mean, seriously. I think it's a waste of time.
You gotta wait until the end of the year when you get some good teams playing, because them same guys who get the stew kicked out of them during March Madness get to get drafted at the top of the piece. And again, that's how the money distorts everything. Money corrupts everything.
Two good player examples of what you're talking about. Fred VanVleet, who I used to go and watch at the Valley here. He played all 4 years. The man has been nothing but a winner. But I think a more prominent one, and people are coming to grips with it, is Brunson in New York. Those are guys that put the time in and that were winners. And there's a stark difference, and neither one of them received their dues until their subsequent contracts.
You remember with Syracuse, I forget my man. Syracuse won. I believe Syracuse won the. They either won it or they, got deep. And I forget the brother's name. He's. I'm pretty sure he's before Melo. Um, he like player of the year and all of
Pearl, you
that.
talking
But
about Pearl?
he's a big. He was a
He was a
big.
big.
Yeah, he was. I'll look it up in the course of our conversation. But all I was getting at is that guy had all of these accolades. I think I'm fairly certain he played
Are you
4
talking
years.
about Derek Coleman?
Not DC. He had 4 years at Syracuse, and then fell in the draft because he had 4 years. He had all these accolades, but he fell in the draft because he stayed 4 years. And so like even that, so my man, which is why he wears 0. My man that plays point guard for
Damian Lillard.
Like Lillard, 4 years at Weber State. He plays the game the way he plays the game because of them 4 years. Pretty sure Steph played what 3-4 years at Davidson. Played 4 years at Davidson, right? And so pretty sure Clay played all 4 years at Washington State, right? And it's like, but this is how the thing it gets corrupted, and then we see it, and Calipari, for him to be like, the thing has changed. It ain't changed. It ain't changed this year. This is what it's looking like for you. It changed before the portal. It wasn't the portal that caused him to start losing. It was his model. And and there's X number of people who are complicit with it. Right. And
The machine is complicit with it.
So like the coach at Maryland, when Melo came out, the coach at Maryland, he was one of them guys too that wouldn't do one and done, which is how he could. That's why Melo ended up playing at Syracuse. Melo wanted to stay home, but that guy was like, "Nope, you're gonna be a one and done, so I ain't gonna take it." So he went and took Syracuse to the national championship. So, but Maryland could have had him, but that's fine. I don't have a problem with those coaches that say, "Well, we're not going to do it." I'm just saying, like, the whole thing gets distorted because it's all based. It ultimately gets based on, this money.
Here would be my metaphor for it, because I think it's very much analogous to the so I used both terms correctly, I think, this time. The model is this process, and it's really just trying to produce a product for an event. It's not developing a game. And a classic example of where that else is true is in music. There was a time when you were recording an album, making a record, you brought musicians into the studio and they talked about the music and they played it. And Teddy Pendergrass, I heard him tell, the late Teddy Pendergrass tell the story about Harold Melvin and their first hit, Bad Luck. He said that was a ballad. And they all got to the studio and it just, it wasn't working. He said, this is terrible. And somebody in the band said, the problem is the tempo. Why don't you take this and do this with it? So it used to be all that great music, even on record, was a function of the interaction of musicians with each other to produce this art. Now the way we make a record is I come in, lay down my track, and you come in, lay down your track, somebody else shows up a week later to sing something, and the engineer splices all of that together. Now that's great engineering, but that ain't art, because art gets created in the moment. And this is just a product and a process. But we have so anesthetized our intellect and sensibility that we no longer can discern the difference between, I'm gonna say, fundamentally garbage and art. And at some level, great athletics is an art. Okay, I mean, because it happens in a moment. These are moves just like jazz. You'll never hear that song like that again live. Okay, you watch this game, these moves will be duplicated, imitated, but you'll never see that. And that's what it meant to be there in that moment, because literally that was the experience. And so if you think about it, we have commoditized the whole country, whole culture. Okay, that everything we experience has no humanity in it anymore. It is products to be marketed. It's the bread for the Roman circus that's now the American society, American economy. So this is what, for me, this is what failing, collapsing cultures look like. You know, you can see in making the money, you suck the life out of.
Yeah, I mean everything is motivated, like you said, to generate this sort of momentum towards the bottom line from the AAU system on up. Because I need one and dones because I need sizzle in the draft. I need sizzle in the draft because I have some teams that are underperforming that are going to need to sell season tickets. And if I can get behind some of these lottery picks that go to these underperforming teams, we can sell some season tickets on hope, to the fan base. So it is all interrelated, and it's a problem. It's a major problem, and it is a situation that there is no clear way out of because there's no intent. The bottom line is that you see the exact same parallels in Hollywood as you do in sports, so it's contrived. Norman Lear said that serious black fathers don't sell sitcoms, so they tried to avoid them. I have seen interviews with the mothers of black athletes, father sitting right next to them, never seen on screen. How they're able to clip them out, I just don't. I have no idea.
Some of us are complicit in that.
I didn't hear you, Dr. Alexander.
Because some of us are complicit in that narrative.
Very much so. Very much so. But it's a narrative.
So this is one of those places of interest
Interest
convergence.
convergence.
This is one of those examples where the system has a vested interest in the stereotype, but some of us have internalized that stereotype too. And so when we get into those spaces, we don't want to rock the boat. We want what we want. So we don't say nothing. They don't say nothing. They present what they present, and it looks the way it looks. So just in the context of this conversation, and again, specific to what you just brought up, how at one and the same time are we having these conversations about these kids coming from nowhere, and it costs $35,000 for them jokers to get to work. And so we still telling this narrative of the hood kid. Meanwhile, all of these kids are playing private ball. If they're not playing, if they're not going to a private school, they are going. They do 1 or 2 years, a public school, and then they go to a prep school. HF up here, Homewood Flossmoor, in my neighborhood, just one state. Best player on the team just came back from prep school in Florida, right? And he came to
Was it
HF.
one of the IMG schools?
Yeah. And
And
so
IMG is what, 40, 70,000 a year? What is it?
I mean, so it's So this is what we got happening. And so you have that happening at the same time. You're still getting this narrative, where, woe is me, single family, where I came from. Brother, you ain't been hungry a day in your life. you have all the best that can come. And that's great. Let's whatever you got, I'm sure it was due you. Your parents did what they did. But let's not get up here and act like you came from the low end, because you didn't. And so that becomes a part of the problem too. That's a problem with the narrative and how, there's just another piece of this thing that we have to pay attention to. And incidentally, the player I was talking about was John Wallace. John Wallace was All-American, played 4 years, got drafted at 18. You had guys out of high school get drafted before him. You had an international player get drafted before him. You had guys in college who were coming out early, who were not All-American, get drafted before him. So no value for the 4-year guy.
No.
And still really don't have value for the 4-year guy.
Unless they get writers to create paths for them, I think the one thing that has fallen off in terms of the narrative that you don't hear anymore is you don't hear the story about how athletics, let's say, made a difference in your life. You don't hear the 25 or 40-year-old that said, but for the scholarship, but for the coaches.
If it wasn't for this.
But for this, I would be who I got a chance to be who I was. There is no kid playing today that's their story. Okay.
Mr. Johnson used to open up the gym at night so I can go in there and work out. No, that ain't happening. I had to sweep the floor to get my.
Oh man. Well, I was really surprised. I'd gone, and maybe you all knew more about it than I did, but I always thought the narrative around Dwayne Wade was that he had to dress in high school out of plastic bags, and
Dwayne had a rough go for real.
Yeah, but I was surprised to see his father. And I believe it was at the Hall of Fame game, and I had never
know that he existed.
I had never knew that this man, and particularly the love that he showed him, and publicly acknowledging him. So I mean, because it was as if there was a void there. But Dwayne has always played with a man that, like a man that knew who he was. This man was groundbreaking. A lot of people give Kobe, to me, the credit that Dwayne Wade should have had, because Kobe, when you talked about things being organic, Kobe was the opposite of that, because Kobe would take and mirror what Mike would do. So Kobe's fist pump was not moving to me, because that was Mike's. Kobe's backing him down and turning around and shimmying him and shake. It wasn't it wasn't organic to me, because that was Mike. But Dwayne, when you looked at Dwayne Wade, it was different. What'd you say?
I think that's what film study is.
Yeah, I understand that, but
if you're gonna study film, and if you're gonna study film, you study Mike.
I understand that, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and nobody can take away what
you just said was something wrong. That's like staying in school for 4 years. You said the same thing.
I said that I was not moved.
You said it wasn't organic.
No, I wasn't moved. I'm not moved by him the way I was by Dwayne Wade. That's all.
You know what?
The guy was
about Dwayne, and so I was here. I was ground zero with that. I was running the community center over in Robbins, and so what Wade did. So Wade had his he had a stepson, Demetrius. Demetrius is the oldest, and then they had Dwayne, and then He had Lester and then a younger son. So Wade's an old school battle. You know, he'll playground dude too. Dwayne's dad, and so they used to like literally barnstorm as a family. They go play at Hayes Park. They play, you know, they play all over the South Side. They go play on the West Side, and you know, Dwayne learned to play the basketball. He learned to play basketball from grown men with grown men. And so, but one of them people, you know, just like Isaiah talks about his big brother, man, you had to see Demetrius, Dwayne's big brother, killer. But and you know, so Dwayne grew up in that. Dwayne grew up in that gym. You know, Demetrius grew up playing in that gym. All those guys, you know, and again, they would come in and play together. They would come in and play against each other, be the best on the court, be the best on both teams or whatever. And so you saw that work. I don't I know that Dwayne started making like those U.S. teams, but I don't think Dwayne was I don't think
No, he
Dwayne
wasn't.
was an
That's why,
AAU guy.
that's why he was there, Marquette. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right.
And,
he was yeah, that guy
and
he did
literally,
all he did somewhere between the South Side of Chicago and Robbins until he left and went to Marquette. But yeah, go ahead.
wait a minute. And you didn't know who he was at Marquette till his senior year, and they went to the dance and they got to the Elite Eight. That was when somebody said, "Damn, he can play." Who was that? Here's what we're describing, because the other place there we have been significant, but it also happened to what you just described as basketball is what music used to be like, particularly jazz. That you honed your craft, your skill, playing live music in clubs, even if it was R&B. That those acts from Ike and Tina Turner to the Temptations, all of them was in, you know, small joints, little cop, you know, and it was live and it was organic and you was figuring it out. Yeah, you look at somebody else or listen to somebody else, and then like you did playing ball, you wasn't still. Kobe was in Italy watching film, so he's copying. When you was in the environment, you still in moves or notes. You know, you didn't want to. You say, "Oh, that's interesting. I think I could do that," and let me see how that would happen. Uh, that you guys will remember this, but there was an expression with when you were asked about somebody young, a young guy coming along. He said, what about so and so?" And the first thing somebody would say, "He got talent."
Hmm.
What about so and so? The next thing would say, "Oh, he got skills." Now, all that meant was he took the talent and he's improving it. What you was waiting for is for somebody to say, when you ask, "What about so and so?" You say, "Oh, he got game.
He can
He
play.
got game."
Yeah.
Okay, that's the difference. If you put the evolution to the next level means that not only do I have the talent, I developed the skills, but I have now figured out how to play. Okay. And you can now put me anywhere, just like if I was a musician. Once I know how to play, I can play with anybody. You can put me in any, because I got a game now, and I can make the adjustments for the circumstances. And you can't do that if all you got is talent. You can't do that if all you are highly skilled, Larry. That's the players you're talking about now. They are highly skilled. And did naturally, because James Madison did it to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin couldn't do it to James Madison. With that much pressure on the ball in Dublin, the back door was wide open with nobody going. You got that's layup night if you know what you're doing. He said because they can't do that and not give something up. So the question is what they giving up. You go overplay, you cut back. Period. It's there all night. And you saw that happen to Wisconsin when they tried to do it to James Madison. They just adjust. You can do that if you want to, but I'm gonna kill you this way. And that's what it means to have a game. And you can see that I can see it in politics. I have watched folks now in this business ain't got a clue what happens next because they got elected with consultants and all that kind of stuff. So they sitting in a room. They sitting in the room where it happened, don't know how they got there, and don't know what they wanted to do once they got there.
As opposed to the organic process, was what, Mike? What would the organic process to get to be a politician that has game?
The same way you got to be a musician or basketball player. You went out, you went out in the schoolyard, the political equivalent of that, and you got tested, and you had to have some talent. Then you had to develop, and then you had to develop some skills, and then you had to figure out a game. And if you could do all of that, the game elevated you. Because even
could you walk me through an instance of that, though, for the people that are listening? If I'm a young individual that wants to ultimately be an effective politician, what would be, how would I get game?
Well, first of all, you go look for some old guys you thought you could beat. Okay. Okay. Because it's like it's literally the equivalent of Marlowe and Avon. And with so many corners. And if you want a corner, if you wanted a ward, if you wanted a position, you got to take it from somebody who already got it. Now you can't go take it from Jed. You ain't taking it from Big O. So you go down the list and say, I think I can beat him though, or we can beat him, or we can take this one. And if we take this one, we can take another. And in the process of learning how to take it, first of all, you get your ass kicked regularly, but you keep coming back, just like in the schoolyard. And every time you know a little bit more, you get a little bit more, and then you study. I mean, here's it ain't well we lost. I'm going home. No, we lost, and now we figured it out. And now I'm doing all the other stuff that I didn't know before. So you building these relationships, and people like old guys will watch you play. People watching you play and say, "Oh, that one, watch him. He might have some," but you putting in work, okay? And the difference then, as opposed to now, there was the equivalent of schoolyard politicians or a joint for politicians where musicians jammed or ball players ball. Politics was kind of the same way. We had a community that was made up of all of these pieces, and once and what hell whether you want to be a gambler or not, once you picked what you wanted to try to do, there was a place you could go practice, learn. Now, didn't nobody get mentored? Okay, that's some bullshit that y'all talk about, man. I mean, Don Calloway and I had a conversation a long, long time ago. He wasn't even a state representative. And I was on a panel at UMSL. Wasn't nobody hardly in the audience. I don't even know why I was there, but Don was in the audience and they had a break. And he came up to me and he said, how come ain't nobody from my generation up there representing? And here's what I told him. I said, because ain't nobody from your generation kicked nobody in my generation's ass and took their seat. That's how you get up there. You get there by put like this. It's 12 spots on the team. It's 5 starters. Okay. The question is, do you want to make the team? If you want to make the team, do you want to start? If you want to start, you got to take that from somebody.
But now you know what we do, Mike. We transfer.
Yeah.
Right?
And we couldn't
12 spots is 5 starters. My son can't play. We going over here.
Yeah, and we couldn't transfer. You couldn't transfer. You couldn't leave the Black community. Okay.
That's what the portal is all about, baby.
Right. So yeah, so if you was gonna be this, you're gonna have to be them. Okay. You're gonna have to be better than them. And that's how you get good at it. Okay. And if you ain't got the heart for it, ain't got the talent for it, don't want to work to develop the skill, then you ain't gonna make it.
You know,
But
professional athletes understand that better than anybody. They understand that
it's the same. But
every
and I think I told you this guy that's something. I learned how to be a politician, learned how to be a ball player, failed a little bit at becoming a ball player. That's how I learned how to be an effective politician. Same thing. Exact same thing.
And so we need those mechanisms that literally, you know, just another of those, you know, other metaphors, you know, from however we source them that we say, but we don't use, you know, iron sharpens iron, right? We don't want none of that. We just want to be. We want no iron up against us. That's not what we want. You know, not many of us. And so many of us want the path of least resistance. And the unfortunate thing is that at a leadership level, you can get that if you're articulate, right? If you're articulate and you can craft a narrative, we'll get all behind you, clap our hands, have no reason to believe you could do anything.
Right.
But because you sound good, we'll do it. And unfortunately, we get the leadership we deserve in that regard, because we ain't holding folks' feet to fire. And, you know, then when these elections come up, particularly again, these off year elections, we're nowhere to be found. You know, we're not showing up. And so, you know, that's kind of what it looks like. And then, but you know that the system always has a response for us, even when we don't. And so the system always has a response. And you know, and back to this basketball piece, you look at this stuff. You know, we you know, usually at this time of the year, we hear about, you know, the exploitation of the Black athlete. Well, I haven't watched more than 5 minutes of any game this year, so I don't know if the graphic has come up talking about graduation rates and the increase in graduation rates. But I'm sure there has been some increase, but I'm also sure that there has been some distortion, because some of the information that they talk about is predicated on this GSR, this graduation success rate, which don't mean that you graduated. It means that when you left school, you was in good standing, which really only means that, you know, you was eligible to play. Don't mean it don't mean you graduated jack. And so a kid that leaves school and goes to the league, if he left school with, you know, the minimum, which is probably a 2.0, that don't count against the program. If the kid goes into the portal and, you know, goes somewhere else and ultimately graduates, the originating school could get credit for that kid as well. And so that, you know, so even in that space where they're trying to quiet us, you know, they've come up with this metrics. And again, some of us, because of what we perceive, you know, the spoils of the you know, the you know, what would equate to a win for us, you know, at the individual level, we good with that. We don't care. We don't, you know, we're not looking at that thing in terms of, you know, we looking at it as, you know, purely good for our household. We're not looking at it as a way, again, for the NCAA to manipulate and
So let me put something out here. And I'm saying it as a father, as a parent who kind of went through all of this. in head and got to think about it. And if you have a child, boy or girl, that is athletically, it has potential to play competitive college athletics, and particularly and I'm going to exclude non-money sports like women's volleyball or something like that, but I'm thinking about the big ones. What you should hope is that your child is never good enough to play Division I, because the most abusive experience in college athletics is Division I sports for the money sports, football, basketball, I'll say men and women's soccer now. And here's my operating premise, that somebody who makes $3 million a year coaching a college basketball or football team, your son or daughter's educational and emotional well-being can't be their first priority. Not that they against us, but I make $3 million a year as long as we can keep doing this.
And I want to keep making that.
And I'm gonna keep making that. That don't make them a bad person. That just means that's their reality.
Or I make more.
Or make more, get to a better place. Now, in Division II is like, first of all, Division II is no reflection on the academic quality of the school. It's just the size of the athletic program. And those coaches, now some of them are ambitious, but a lot of them, just like the guy that was at Oakland, man, I've been here 40 years coaching kids, and my kids graduated. I coached his dad and stuff. So you got a chance to have a legitimate college experience like every other kid and graduate in 4 years, because you didn't have any ambition that you was going to the next level. So I would suggest, and I always remember taking my son Adam to Assumption College in Massachusetts, and I asked the coach, because it's Division II school, and I asked the coach, well, how much school is he gonna miss traveling? He said none. He said everybody we play is within 2 hours of here, 2.5 hours. We leave in the afternoon, we'll be back by midnight. He ain't gonna never miss a day of school because we had a basketball game. I said, what about summer school? He said, I don't pay for summer school. He said, all my guys take 15 hours every semester. And I said, yep, 15 hours times 8 is 120. That gets you out in 4 years. He said, yep. So if you in summer school, it's cause you didn't do something right. He said, so what you're looking for your child is a place where they can continue to play, hopefully on a scholarship, so you don't have to pay for it. But you want a situation that maximizes their opportunity. So you don't want him or her at an elite high level school. When Georgetown, when Patrick Ewing and Georgetown won that national championship, you know how long they were on the road? 3 weeks, because Georgetown is in Washington, D.C., and they were the #1 seed in the West. So John Thompson left Georgetown and didn't come back till the tournament was over. Okay? Because at Georgetown, even the great John Thompson, whose kids graduated, but the priority is playing basketball, because that's what they're there for. So the biggest problem is that parents want their kids to be a lottery ticket for them, as opposed to saying, what's the most effective, best way to get this kid educated and maximize their opportunity to have a good life. So basketball sports can be a vehicle to developing character, and if you're real lucky, and here's the other thing, it's totally unrealistic. I used to tell people way back then, there are 400 Division II and Division I schools in America. And I knew about basketball, and each one of them have 12 scholarships. And that means in an average year, everybody's recruiting about 3 players. That's about all they got room for if everything goes all right. I said, so that means out of the tens of thousands of kids playing, boys playing high school basketball who were seniors, who may have enough talent to compete at the next level, only 1,200 to go get a scholarship. So all this, but we keep this focus on everybody's going to the league, everybody's going to the automatic, because we need to have the raw material for the machine. Because unless we can create enough input on the front end, we won't generate that product that you see at the back end. But if you just look at it from odds and percentages, it's not a realistic opportunity. And even if it is realistic, it's much more realistic that your kid will be down here than up there.
No, and the thing that we have to keep in mind also, Mike, about basketball is that it goes roughly from August through April. So comparatively speaking, certainly men's basketball teams are going to have lower GPAs than the rest of the student body. I shouldn't say student body, but the rest of the athletic programs. Football, by and large, is, August through, obviously everyone works out, every day of the year, but the actual huge time commitment, typically is over by the end of the first semester, and it ramps down. But there are some important things that we also need to make note of with respect to our students that participate in college athletics. As a former advisor at a Division I university who advised college athletes, I can tell you, number one, 2 things. The major reason that most students leave a university for 1 or 2 reasons: either they financially they can't make it anymore, or 2, they don't feel connected. Athletics with these scholarships take care of the financial commitment, and the connection is there embodied in the team. So you have a higher success rate than the student body population. You have a higher graduation rate than the student body population. In addition to that, when it comes to first-time home ownership and age, student athletes, longitudinal studies that show the student athletes own homes earlier and at a higher clip than non-student athletes, because they typically don't have the debt associated with undergrad. And the well-being. Think about just the things that become common nature for student athletes. Division I, Division II, and even Division III. You have to be places at the time you have to be places. That develops a great deal. I mean, and the vast majority of folks don't have that. There's a discipline that is inherent there that we take for granted. Dr. Alexander, do you have anything you want to say?
All that being said, about 30% of college athletes meet the diagnostic criteria for a mental health disorder, and which is higher than the general public, and about out of that number, about 10 to 15% seek care. And so, and I only say that to 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 make it clear that even with, you know, what it can yield, we still got to be realistic about the stressors, the associated stressors, and that's kind of where you know where Mike led, and you know, like, because we have a all or nothing type of take on many of these things, right? And so we like, let's go all in on you know, we're gonna be all in on sports, or we're gonna be all out on sports, and you know, it's the greatest thing. But whatever it is, it's still life. and so and so you put these young people in these spaces, and again, this is where we got to look at kind of the, you know, the deceptiveness of the NCAA. And so I just spoke about the grades thing. The other thing is with the NIL, guess who we ain't talking about no more? We ain't talking about them guys who ain't on scholarship, who's sitting on campus hungry. Now we don't talk about them at all. We don't talk about, you know, we don't talk about the first generation, you know, young person at college struggling to be there, you know, wanted to be a college athlete, you know, and aren't are you know, they the ones. I mean, so they, you know, we talk, oh, I love college sports because it's the love of the game. Well, the cat that loved the game is that cat that's there playing, that walked on. That's the one that's playing because he loved the game. Because they ain't paying for school, and they ain't, you know, they ain't paying for jack. He found a way to be there, right? Probably
The
leverage
real
on
love of
mom.
the game, the real ones are practicing with the women team because they couldn't even walk on.
Yes. They
So they
tried to
working
walk
out.
on.
So they on the
It
practice team with the women.
you know that you know I interviewed a student for practicum last month, and where'd he go? He went. I think he started off at the University of Miami trying to play. You know, he tried to walk on there, couldn't get it on. Then he transferred to so he transferred somewhere in the Big Ten, and so he knew I couldn't play in Miami. I ain't gonna be able to play in the Big Ten, and that's what he did. He started working out, you know, practicing, working for the women's team. You know, that's kind of what he did, which could be another whole another path that people take, because you know, you do that, you still learning basketball, you become a coach.
And you
And
You know,
better.
those
You,
types of things.
my son, and I, you know, I joke, but I knew about that. You know, there was a recruiter from Duke that was here recruiting students, not athletes, students, and so we were invited and we went out. But he lettered in that same vein, and lo and behold, when my son went to Vandy, he was on the women's practice team. And so they would work them out, and you know, he still follows the women. You know, I've been following women's basketball probably the last 20 years. My favorite basketball player, bar none, is Maya. You know, Maya Moore. I think she's as close to a perfect basketball player as you can find. But still, that is you know, that's a route. You're right. Go ahead, Dr. Alexander. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
let me,
Mike was about to speak.
yeah, I want to put a comma here, or at least some parentheses, insert something. Here's the context that you also have to keep about sports, particularly at bigger schools, Division I. Two of the best engineering schools in America are Purdue and Georgia Tech. I mean, elite engineering school. People go to school there to become engineers. I have never met a football player. You know, when they announced you know, used to have they announced the teams, and he said, "Yeah, I'm a junior from so and so, majoring," and you know. Have you ever met an athlete from Georgia Tech or Purdue who's majoring in engineering? But at the University of Missouri, Raleigh, whatever they call it, now, science and technology.
What is it? The Institute of Science and
Science,
Technology.
yeah, science, technology.
Yeah, right. Literally, now they're the Division II school. They got athletic scholarships. They got athletes in baseball, track and field, football, you name it. They field a team in all these sports. And like forever, they have been graduating athletes who are engineers. Okay, so you can be a college athlete and still be an engineer. So the question for the kid is, son, do you want to be an engineer or are you trying to be a football player? He said, because if you want to be an engineer, you ought to go to the University of Missouri at Raleigh. But you ain't gonna be no engineer going to Purdue or Georgia Tech, because they're not gonna let you major in engineering at Purdue or Georgia Tech, because it's too hard. You ain't gonna have enough time to play football. But at the University of Missouri, Raleigh, and probably a lot of other little places like that, you can go become and have an elite career as an engineer, because that curriculum is as great, is as good as the one at Purdue and Georgia Tech. But you ain't gonna get there playing football.
Larry,
Right.
you remember Jimmy Davis? You remember Jimmy Davis played
Absolutely.
quarterback? So Jimmy
Absolutely.
Davis, he's one of those guys, Mike. So we have to do a degree program with Georgia Tech. So you do
Okay.
so you do 2.5, 3 years at Morehouse, and you do 2 years at Georgia Tech, and you come out with a degree in both. And so Jimmy Davis was starting quarterback part of the time that Larry and I were there. And he's one of those guys who would fit that profile that you're talking about, like what you get at Raleigh. That's what you get, for our student athletes at Morehouse. If you're an engineer, you're gonna be an engineer. You just happen to play whatever you play, you run whatever you run, but you're gonna play in the lab too. You gotta go over here and you're gonna get up in this lab and you're gonna get done what you need to get done. And that, but like more recently, we've had people who, in the coaching space that have tried to go to like that traditional, well, I ain't gonna call it traditional, but trying to move this thing in a way that looks like other, some other colleges. And, as we talked about before, Harold Ellis is now the AD, and he's like, no, we're gonna do this the way we've always done this, and that is we're gonna have scholar athletes. And he said, one of the things Harold said, he's like, y'all don't win enough games to get this guy. This guy, so you gonna get this guy who ain't the greatest student, then he need to average 25. But you can't have a bunch of guys averaging 7 points a game and they got a 2-3. So y'all recruiting the wrong guy. So let's go back to our formula. Let's get the same students we've been getting, who have a love for the game, who are coachable, who we can leverage and launch into society. If these guys had a game that they can make it, fine, I'll help them get there. But the reason they had Morehouse is because they wanted to be students first.
And Edwin Moses is the all-time great 400-meter hurdle champion. The only school in America at Division I level that what I said is not true of is Stanford. that if you are a scholar athlete at Stanford, you don't get no passes in the classroom. So and they produce competitive teams that compete, men and women, at the highest level, and it has not infringed on their academics or their athletics. So it is doable if you committed to it. Mm-hmm. But these financial entities that are college sports now, they're not committed to you. Now they don't. If your child gets an education and graduates, they happy. Okay, but that ain't what they're trying to get them. Okay, and I would tell the kid, if you're gonna be cold-blooded about it, don't pick a school where you got to work your ass off to stay on the team. Pick a school where you the one of the better athletes, and you ain't, and the coach got to be glad to have you, as opposed to you trying to kiss the coach's ass to stay and keep your scholarship. So you need to look at it like a business. Okay, this ain't
It is a business decision.
this ain't hoorah for the whole team. This is making a business decision about what makes the most sense for you, because he ain't gonna make that decision, and y'all could end up with a great relationship. He could be one of the most important people in your life, but don't bet on that. Okay, bet on that he ain't gonna care no more about you than he care about anybody else, and you're gonna have to figure this shit out for yourself. Okay, and that's what we don't teach our kids. Okay.
Mike, you know, it's funny you raised that to that point. My son, his rising junior year, spent a summer at Purdue in a program. His rising senior year, he spent at Stanford, and on the campus. So Stanford's campus is going to yield the best and brightest, as well as the programs. But in addition to that, to your point, there was the conclusionary speaker was an admiral that was a graduate of, it was a brother, because the program was sponsored by NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. Dr. Womack and those guys, they do a phenomenal job of creating and cultivating basically middle school students all the way through adulthood into their professional lives, giving them, giving those students and those families all the resources they need to get through engineering, these very, very difficult engineering schools, and that discipline on its own. But Purdue is where NSBE was founded. So my son goes, spends a summer there. And he and his team make a full robotic. They have a robotics competition. They stay on campus for a number of weeks and so forth. The speaker was a former football player at Purdue. And the first thing he says, well, I knew after my freshman year, I wasn't going to be able to stay on this football team and major in engineering at the same time. And so, to your point, he left he left and he was not going to change his major, but he had to quit the football team. The man finished his engineering degree, enrolled in the Navy, and he's an admiral. He's, at the time, I'm sure he's retired by now, but he was an admiral. So, I mean, that you say no lies, as the kids say, with respect. And those are, you've got to make a decision at some point with respect to this business that we call life, the business aspect of life.
You all remember Chris Ogden, Chris Ogden and Sam Ivey. They were the twin towers at Webster Groves.
Yes.
So Chris's daughter is at she's in March Madness. She's at Stanford. So Courtney Ogden.
I did not need a reason to. No, well, I didn't need a reason to cheer for Stanford. Thank you very much.
And so Courtney Ogden is there. She is there. So, but again, she ain't come from nowhere. She, her parents, they did what they did, and their daughter is at Stanford, and she is contributing, and she's top 10 in women's high school basketball, which is, and she was smart, which is how she landed there at Stanford. But what her parents, wrapped her around with was a combination of all of it. The academics, social life, family life, and athletics, and and so now it is so that she has an opportunity to to experience life at Stanford.
And it's a beautiful life at Stanford on the yard, on the farm, as they call it. It is a beautiful life. Mike, you're
You
muted.
know,
You're muted, Mike. Mike, you're muted.
I was going to say, to that point, is the importance of parents and adults, because a child will not make the Stanford choice. When you see that there's some adult or adults that are guiding that child through the process and blocking all the distractions, and at the end of the day, saying, we go help. It's got to be your choice because you're the one that's got to go. But here's why that don't make sense, and this does. Okay, and our problem, and I'm gonna say it's a generational problem. I'll say it's the what do they call us, the baby boomers. As a collective, we've done the worst job of raising children, and you can tell it by the children our children have raised, of any generation in America. If our ancestors, parents, grandparents, people before had been as sloppy and lazy as we have been, we wouldn't be here because we never would have survived. So all of these challenges are always been in America, but we drank the American Kool-Aid like the struggle was over. We ain't got to worry no more. And yeah, you can do this. No, as long as we black in here, we will always have to figure it out for ourselves, because this will always be an us and them situation
Versus them situation.
versus them situation, and we ain't gonna never be them.
No.
Okay, they ain't gonna never include us, and I don't want to be included. That's the other thing. So I'm not trying to be that.
Mike, you just created another show because the theory that I had been working with is that the further we get from the lash, the more I guess complicit we become. But that that my theory takes away the accountability. You just hit on what the accountability should be. Charles, would you, Dr. Alexander, please take us out?
I think what Mike was just talking about in terms of how parenting kind of looks now, I want to put with, what he also said earlier and what he said before about, taking these corners. In this space too, even in this conversation that we're having with regard to college basketball, uh, I think you take these 2 points that Mike just made, and I arrive at, I think it's Hamburger Hill, where they, they decided that it was necessary to, storm and win this hill, but had no vested interest in securing the hill. So essentially, all those people who died in securing in capturing the hill, it was for naught. And there's a degree to which that's how we move. We fight these fights, we get to where we get to, and then we act like it's over. Or we have, we don't have no vested interest in staying firmly entrenched in that which we said was our interest. Right. And so again, we have to pay attention to what's going on. We can't get distracted by, the you know the glitter that the system throws, despite what it might look like. Our kids still being exploited by the NCAA. College athletics is absolutely a pathway, and it can be mutually beneficial to the athlete and to the school. But it ain't beneficial just because. It's beneficial because you do the work and you're knowledgeable about that environment, and you're able to support your young person in that whole experience. You're able to provide the necessary the guidance and support, or at least point your son or daughter to the necessary guidance and support. So we just got to know that this too, even with all the glitter, it ain't gold, and it's a hostile territory, and our kids are vulnerable in these spaces, and we have to act accordingly.
To that point, Dr. Alexander, I think that summed up well. I just add one thing. When you visit a school, start in the outplacement office. That's where you start, particularly for us. So the questions that, thanks to the outplacement office that we had at Morehouse, I still have the questions that Benjamin McLaurin armed me with. Number one, where are the graduates that are majoring in what my child plans on graduating and going? Who are you the largest feeder school to? Who's the largest recruiter here? What is the salary, and what is the grade point average necessary to go to a top tier, mid tier, and a lower tier graduate school coming out of your institution? To your point, Dr. Alexander, what I heard was we can't drop our kids off and just leave them anywhere. We
Can't do that.
We can't take our hands off the wheel anywhere.
We've been doing it, and we got to stop doing that.
And we got to stop doing that, just like you said, all the way around. We can't elect a politician and just leave them there.
Can't just leave them there.
No. I put you here, and this is what I want in return. This, Mike, I love your way of putting it. I've adopted it a long way. A lot of these relationships are essentially transactional, and we need to stop take the sweatshirt off and understand that there's a business end of these transactions. All right, we want to thank you all for joining us this week, and if it's the Lord's will, we'll be back here next week with a topic that we would, hopefully enlighten all of us. Signing off for the Level Set is Larry Fields, Mike Jones, and Dr. Charles Alexander.